are back. Welcome into a new edition of Daily Faceoff live after a week-long holiday hiatus. I hope everybody over in the YouTube tuning in, however you tune in, had a great week of holiday festivities and whatnot. I'm Tyler Remchik. He is Frank Saravalli. Frank, how was your Christmas?
It was good. Last show of 2024. Let's make it a good one.
Yes, sir, indeed. The show, as always, is brought to you by Bet365. Download the app, use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. And because we haven't done a show in a week, there's a lot for us to get to, and returns is kind of the theme of things, including Alex Ovechkin. He's the topic of our Dominion Lending Center's poll question today because he's back for the Washington Capitals, and he's got 47 games to get 25 goals to pass Wayne Gretzky's record for the most goals in NHL history. Have your say over in the YouTube chat. Will Alex Ovechkin break the record? We're going to chat about that in a little bit. We're also going to be joined by Stephen Ellis live from Ottawa, covering the World Juniors for us at Daily Faceoff. So a whole bunch of good stuff coming. But first, Frank, the one real significant piece of news that we got during the week-long hiatus was that the Detroit Red Wings made a coaching change. Derek Lalonde is out after 2 full seasons and I guess a couple of months. The Detroit Red Wings have made a change at head coach, a 13-17-2 start, fired on Boxing Day as well. What did you make of the timing? The Boxing Day thing for maybe like the personal side, but also from where the Red Wings are at in their season.
I mean, look, Steve Yzerman giving a new meaning to Boxing Day. You can come in, Derek Lalonde, and box up your office. I mean, jokes aside, I think it was pretty clear for a while, anyone watching the Detroit Red Wings, that some kind of change was needed. It didn't come on the personnel side in terms of a trade to help improve this team. And I feel like the Wings were kind of backed into a corner here. What we're doing isn't working. To continue to do the same thing over and over again doesn't really make a lot of sense. So this is a coaching change that you could see coming from a million miles away. You look at Todd McLellan coming in. He has a relationship with Steve Yzerman going back 2 decades. He was the assistant coach in Steve Yzerman's final year when Steve Yzerman transitioned to VP of hockey ops for the Wings. He then remained on for 2 more seasons as assistant coach before going to the San Jose Sharks to become a head coach after winning a Stanley Cup in 2008. And look, I get the reason why the Wings made this move, but I thought Steve Yzerman's press conference was fascinating. That it certainly seemed to me that he was definitely not immune to the criticism that's been floating around in the market, where he basically said, look, if you've got any better ideas on how to handle this, by all means, let me know. And this is a personnel issue for the Red Wings. This team is not good enough as constructed to be a playoff team, to even really be close to being a playoff team. And that falls back on the general manager.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm with you, and I think we're kind of in the majority when it comes to hockey fans and people in the sport in that line of thinking. There's been a lot of questionable decisions in Detroit. I know yourself and Jason Gregor this morning on the DFO Rundown talked about the Jake Wallman thing. Like you said, that was a matter of just not doing your due diligence as Steve Yzerman and properly shopping the player around the league. And I even looked to the fact that, like, it was clear they needed quality veteran defensemen to try play with Edvinsson and Seider because the bets they had made weren't working. And instead, they went and signed Vladimir Tarasenko to a 2-year, $4.75 million deal. Again, that worked out fine because it's Tarasenko and he's playing well, but they should have spent that money on a D-man.
No, it's not at all what they needed. And it just feels like the cycle of defensemen that have been in and out of that organization over the last few years, Wall, Gostisbehere, Sherratt, Hall, Petrie, go through the list. It comes down to a player evaluation thing. When you get 1 or 2 of those guys wrong, fine. That happens in every team building exercise. But to consistently get 5, 6, 7, 8 of these guys in a row wrong, at some point, that's on you. That's on your pro scouting staff. That's on whoever you're trusting to help make these decisions, because it hasn't been good enough.
Yeah, let's quickly talk about the decision to hire Todd McLellan. He is going to be head coaching his 4th franchise in his career. And hey, I mean, listen, had great runs with San Jose, took the Oilers, turned them into a playoff team, had that LA Kings team as a playoff team, and pretty much every year he coached them. But is he the right guy for Detroit?
Well, I think he could be. It'll be really interesting to see what he does with his structure. The Kings played a really disciplined system, and obviously the players didn't like it because they felt like they were stifled in creating offense. Jim Hiller and the Kings have gone in a different direction this year, and the Kings have had lots of success to this point in time. But if he can provide some of that same structure, maybe he can help a team that is deficient defensively. If he can kind of slow the rush and control play a little bit more, that's probably more of what this team needs. We're not entirely certain yet if that's the route that he's going to take with the Detroit Red Wings, but they need all the help they can get.
Detroit fires a coach, Boston has, St. Louis has as well. And Frank, every time a team's fired a coach, everyone kind of just with the side eyes looks at the New York Rangers and goes, what are you guys next? Are you guys going to pull the trigger here? And I mean, they lose again the other day. They now have 1 win in their last 6. They've lost 3 in a row. And as they lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning coming out of the break at a point where the team was saying all the right things, Keandre Miller said, hey, we just needed the break to kind of reset, get away from each other. And they come back and lay flat. And for the 4th or 5th time in the last month here as they've gone on this 4-12 run, I go, that's the game that gets the coach fired. And then it doesn't get the coach fired. What's going on?
Yeah, it's 100 games or so into the Peter Laviolette experience in New York, and it's sideways, but I don't think it really has anything to do with him. This team quit on November 24th when Chris Drury sent out that memo to the rest of the league. They've fallen flat since then. I mean, Larry Brooks probably said it best in the New York Post in the last few days when he said they've quit on themselves, they've quit on the city, they've quit on the coach, they've quit on the organization, they've quit on the GM. They're lifeless. And I don't think that comes back to the coach. Of course he has a small hand in it. And I think some of the decisions have been fascinating. The Kakko decision was one. Then the decision to scratch Zach Jones, who I thought had been playing really well and is, I think, an important part of, at least what they're trying to accomplish moving forward. The Rangers, look at the standings here. It's been a precipitous drop. You have to really try hard, or I guess not try hard, to fall like you have in the standings. I mean, they were in a clear wild card spot 6 weeks ago on November 24th. This spiral, it's been a death spiral to their season. Is it over? No, because they're still, 6 points back of the Penguins with 3 games in hand, and the Penguins are just outside of the wild card picture at the moment. It's not over, but it's, to quote another New York icon, it's getting late early for the Rangers.
Yeah, it really is, especially when the rest of that conference, and hey, it might make for a really fascinating playoff race, which would be a breath of fresh air compared to kind of what we've gotten in previous years in the Eastern Conference. Although I guess last year was interesting for a little bit, but Ottawa's finding ways to win. Pittsburgh, whether you believe in them or not, finding ways to win. Even the Buffalo Sabres have strung together 3 straight victories coming out of the holiday break. So if everything's going to stay mushy and the Red Wings don't find a way to keep pace, the Rangers, that is, don't find a way to keep pace, then yeah, you're bang on with that line of it's getting late early. I love that you use the word lifeless, because I think that really is the one word that sums it up as best as it can. So is there anything else they can do, or is this going to be Chris Drury going down with the sinking ship saying, listen, I'm not firing Peter Laviolette, I'm not making another big trade? Either these guys figure it out, or they were never good enough to begin with.
I think the onus has to be on the players. I mean, how did Mika Zibanejad forget how to play hockey? What happened to the rest of this group? Look, I get that there were probably some hurt feelings, some players feeling like they were disrespected, but you could be day to day with hurt feelings, but you can't be week to week. You can't be month to month. And at some point, you've got to get it together as a group to find a way forward. And when I look at the GM and all the cap space that he's accruing, I don't know that I'd want to be trading with half of a deck right now. First off, you're dealing with players that their value is probably the lowest that it's been in a while. You're also dealing with half the league isn't probably interested or isn't a fit as a trade partner because of the juncture of the season that we're at. If you're really going to do some major roster surgery, the summer is the time to do it, not now. And so if you want, I guess you could make a coaching change. I don't know how much that's going to change, because things aren't working.
Yeah, I am with you. Even the most optimistic of Rangers fans, Joe is in our chat every day watching the show. I used to be optimistic, not anymore. And that is a tough, tough spot to be in. Let's move along, Frank. Another big piece of news. Alex Ovechkin is back. He returns out of the holiday break after missing 5 weeks with a broken fibula. And what does he do? Pop, pop, 2 more goals in 2 games for Alex Ovechkin. He is up to 17 goals in 20 games on the season. There is our goal counter at 870. You can track it all at dailyfaceoff.com. We're always updating that. And let me throw you the poll question, Frank. 25 goals in 47 games. Like, you can't bet against Ovi, can you?
No chance. Look, I thought it was such a telling sign. You know, we knew he'd be motivated. It's one thing to be motivated, but it's another thing to come back the way that he has, not play. Okay, so he doesn't play for 6 weeks. He comes back in a back-to-back scenario, scores in both games, and not only that, but his minutes ratchet up in game 2 of the back-to-back as a 39-year-old to 20 minutes in the last game, and he's unfazed. He still manages to get on the board, now 25 away, to your point. And to me, it's a matter of when this season now and not if, because that's the question we were all asking ourselves. How is this guy going to respond after missing so much time? Really one of the few, if any, extended absences of his career. I mean, he's played in so many available games of his team that I just think he's put himself in this spot now where you've got to begin gassing up the jet if you're Gary Bettman and Wayne Gretzky, circling some dates on the calendar.
Absolutely. By the way, just the second time this season he's played north of 20 minutes last night against Detroit. You mentioned the percentage of team games played, and I do think, again, like, he doesn't miss a lot of time. Look at this board they had on the broadcast. Highest percentage of games played to the team for players who have spent 18 or more seasons with a single franchise. Like, for the last 18, 19 years, Alex Ovechkin has been in the lineup for 95.1 of the Washington Capitals games. Only 3 other players have a higher percentage than that. It's crazy. And to see him again at 39 with the really first extended absence of his career to just show, like, oh no, I'm not phased at all. There is going to be no rust. I am just right back to it. Wildly impressive.
Crazy. And Pat, if you could leave this up for 1 second, I wanted to give Anze Kopitar just a little bit of love because I think he's having the best season that no one's talking about, on pace for his second best point production of his career. You see, he's played in almost 98% of the Kings available games. Here's another interesting stat. 18 seasons now, he's led his team in scoring. There's only 2 players in league history that for 18 years or more have led their team in scoring, and they are Wayne Gretzky and Gordie Howe. So pretty elite company. 18 different seasons that Kopitar has led his team in scoring is crazy.
Couple of ageless wonders in the NHL. Just because the YouTube chat is talking about it, Frank, I'll throw this your way. Out of the now 870 goals, if you had to guess, how many of Ovi's do you think are empty netters?
I'm going to say 120.
Ooh, yeah, actually, you're a little off, but it still is high. 60 of them are empty netters. 60 of them. It is still.
So I saw people complaining about this, and not in our YouTube chat, but on social media over the holiday break. And then I was like, okay, but think about all the goalies that didn't even know what the butterfly was, and look at their equipment when Wayne Gretzky scored. You tell me, what's harder, scoring on an empty netter in 2025 or scoring on some of the goalies that Wayne Gretzky scored on back in the day? I'm going to say it's closer than you think.
Yeah, I like this comment from Rangers fan 05. Love Ovi's comment. Paraphrasing here. If you think it's easy to score on an empty netter, you go out there 6-on-5, do it yourself. Yeah, it's not. If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Here's the other part. Your coach has to actually trust you enough to put you out there when it's 6-on-5. You can't be a liability, or else you're never going to get off the bench.
Yeah, totally. And again, another reason to believe in Ovi is the fact that Spencer Carberry throws him out there in those empty net situations. Speaking of injuries, Frank, the Vancouver Canucks are dealing with a couple of big ones just as they get JT Miller back in the lineup from his extended, granted non-injury absence. We find out that Quinn Hughes is week to week and Elias Pettersson is going to be out a week. And you pair that with the fact the Canucks only have 3 wins in their last 10 games. And the fact is, like, I know they're holding on to a playoff spot, 600 points percentage. That's all good. They've lost more games than they've won this year, 17-18 straight up. They've just managed to milk a handful of loser points. Now, there is a glass half full, glass half empty way to read this 17-10-8 record. You could sit there and go, hey, even though they're not playing their best hockey, they milk points. Or you could sit there and say, hey, no, they have lost more games than they've won, and it's concerning. Couple the injuries with the run they're on. What's your concern level for the Canucks here as they head into 2025?
It's definitely ratcheted up a bit. And Pat, I don't know if you have the Vancouver Canucks D pairs or not, but if you do, throw those up on the screen. And if not, I'll read them because it is scary without Filip Hronek and Quinn Hughes. Derek Forbort, Tyler Myers, Carson Soucy, Noah Juleson, Eric Brandstrom, Vinny Desharnais. Those are like 4 replacement level players and 2 NHLers. That's a really, week to week, 10 days, 14 days, 25 days, whatever it is, they cannot get Quinn Hughes back fast enough. Not just for how well he's played this season, but how poor this defense is constructed. I look at this group now, and you could go look at some others around the league. I mean, there you go. That's it right there. Go look at some others. This is as bad as it gets. The Utah Hockey Club, they're missing a bunch of their top 4 defensemen. I would take their lineup every day of the week and twice on Sunday versus what the Vancouver Canucks are putting out right now. So to me, all this does is highlight exactly the issues that they have construction wise with competing in today's NHL. And it is definitely of concern the longer this goes on, which is why I'd expect them to be really active on the trade front.
Oh, and they always are as well, which is fun. Who are the teams they play in the next week? Well, maybe this makes you feel a bit better if you're a Canucks fan. You get the Flames, who granted are no pushover, but you get the Kraken, the Preds, and the Habs coming up as well. So again, no easy nights in the NHL, but I would still take those 4 games versus a run where, I mean, say they would have had Vegas, Winnipeg, LA, and whoever, right? So maybe that's some saving grace here, is that their schedule isn't exactly the hardest, but there are no easy games in hockey, Frank. Remember, Latvia, Canada, that's a perfect segue into the next wave in our World Junior coverage, which is brought to you by Fountain Tire. You and your family's safety is important, and they treat your vehicle like it's their vehicle. Whether it's new tires, whether your engine has a little rattle, you can stop at a Fountain Tire today, and they'll sort you out. Check them out online at fountaintire.com. Always a pleasure to welcome in Stephen Ellis, who is boots on the ground in Ottawa for the 2025 World Juniors, covering it like a blanket for us over at dailyfaceoff.com. And Stephen, let's start with the big result. Canada losing to Latvia in a shootout, and it obviously has led to quite a lot of reaction, and whether that's overreaction or not from Canadian hockey fans, I guess is part of the conversation here. So let me ask you, was that just a random one-off historic upset, or was that a comment on the quality of this Canadian team?
Well, first off, it looks like we're going to have about 5,000 people here for a live taping of this show. As you can see, people walking in and out. You might even see some familiar faces, former NHLers. But to me, when you look at that Canada-Latvia game, Canada dominated the puck possession. They had 57 shots on net. Jack Ivakovic looked really good in net. But you saw the very glaring issues out there. They were playing to the perimeter. They were not very creative. Their power play was a disaster. I think they took 6 penalties in that game. So right now, they've got the most penalties in this tournament. Their penalty kill is doing really well. But you saw against Latvia in those last 10 minutes where they allowed 2 goals down a man. I think the thing there is, as much as I love great stories like that, I've seen Latvia win the World Championship against Canada. If you redo that game, I don't think Canada's losing. That's a group that has a ton of skill. They got to be able to put it together, though, and the lines, like, I've made an argument that if you could fire a coach mid-tournament, and we've seen Finland do that, but Canada probably should have considered it. They were never going to do that in Ottawa where Dave Cameron coaches, but I just don't understand these line combinations.
I don't understand the roster construction. Like, to me, you could say whatever you want about Dave Cameron. The quality of players that Canada left on the cutting room floor, by virtue of the arrogance with which they construct their entire organization, to me is why Canada lost to Latvia. There's too many good players sitting at home watching.
Yeah, I was at selection camp. I can tell you Zane Perek did not have a good selection camp. Should he still have been on this team? Probably. I still think that his dynamicism and the way he moved the puck, you would have won him there. Michael Misa, absolutely no reason to not bring him even to selection camp. He should have been there. But at the same time, they sat Carson Raykoff, who was a 50-goal scorer in the OHL. They brought Luca Pinelli, who, maybe a lot of people are looking at this saying, why is he here? Well, he's on pace for 50 goals in the OHL too. So they do have these options. But yeah, they did leave more talent at home than obviously any other country, and it's hurting them right now.
Yeah. So what do you make of their response then? Because they do bounce back against Germany, but I'm still concerned with their lack of 5-on-5 scoring that ultimately in the end might hurt them.
Yeah, like it's kind of a weird situation where you've got a goalie who's got back-to-back shutouts, and everyone's still concerned about this team. And Carter George has been great, and he was great again last night. But what we saw there was a team that just could not connect on their passes. And Canada, again, with all the skill they've got, there's no question about the amount of skill this team has and the talent. It's just they're not gelling. And a lot of that, to me, is you look at the line combinations. Carson Rakoff and Porter Martone are line mates with the Brampton Steelheads. They're on pace for something like both over 50 goals this year. Why have they not played a minute together? Why have they not been in the lineup at the same time? Why did it take so long to put Sam Dickinson, probably the best offensive defenseman in the OHL, why did it take so long to put him on the power play? Gavin McKenna, he's not scoring. Hey, let's stop putting him with Luca Pinelli. Unfortunately, Luca Pinelli's not a guy that's going to finish those plays there for him the way that they need him to. So still a lot of questions with that team, but I think what we did see was, at least in the power play, a bit more of a boost and good goaltending.
Okay, so I'm rubbing my hands together. We have a delicious New Year's Eve matchup. U.S., Canada, the traditional New Year's Eve festivities. And you've got a U.S. team that's coming off of a loss to Finland. They played on back-to-back. They took care of business against Latvia one day after Latvia was celebrating probably the biggest win in their federation's history, potentially, knocking off Canada. But the U.S. loses to Finland. So what do you make of this game, and how does the U.S. look relative to Canada so far in this tournament?
Well, that game against Latvia outshot the Americans for a good majority of that game, and that was a tired Latvian team going up against a rested American team. My big concern about that group heading in was their scoring depth, and I know they scored 10 goals against the Americans, or against Germany, but they still had all their big stars going out there. They need their guys, like just their bottom six, to go out there and produce, and we haven't really seen that necessarily. I think the one big issue for the Americans, though, is Trey Augustine. This was the X factor. This is the guy they needed to go out there and be perfect. He's allowed 8 goals in his 2 starts this tournament. That's not good. The game against Germany, a few of those he would have definitely liked to have back. And yesterday, Finland just kept shooting glove side. But again, when Trey Augustine's at his best, the Americans have the best goalie in the tournament. And when the top line, the BC line, looks as good as we know it can for the Americans, they're unstoppable. So I'm expecting this to be the game everyone's hoping for, as tight and as exciting, because both of them are flawed, but both of them are good enough to make up for it.
Oh, flawed, skilled hockey. That's what the World Juniors is all about. That's when you get your best games. Let's quickly flip over to Group B, Steven. Czechia, 3-0 to start. Are they making you rethink your power rankings a little bit here?
Group B is not a good group. Let's just be very clear about that. Switzerland's not a good team. Kazakhstan, a bit of a disaster of a team out there. The game against Slovakia, they took advantage of a Slovak team that just seemed to be kind of asleep. The big question is going to be at that game against Sweden. Right now you look at the goal differential, and the Czechs look really good because of that massive win against Kazakhstan. I think Sweden's a slightly better team, but when it comes to the Czechs, it's a group that a lot of these guys have been to the Hlinka finals in the last 2 years. They've had some good runs at the U18s. They need to go out there and just put it together. They need that scoring to work. And for me, the key for that was 2 players, Edward Shala, who had 2 goals yesterday, and Michael Rabel, the goalie, who's been lights out. So as long as those guys are thriving, the Czechs are in a good spot, but we'll see how it goes in the crossover round.
Yeah, the crossover is going to be fascinating with some of the stunning results we've had so far. And if we get a few more, who knows what some of these quarterfinal matchups could be. Steven, you'll have it all covered for us at dailyfaceoff.com. Enjoy the hockey today, and we'll chat with you a little bit later on in the tournament.
Yep, thanks, guys.
Moving along to our daily face-off inbox question, #AskDFO. Frank, a handful of milestones over the weekend in the NHL, including one for Carolina Hurricanes head coach Rod Brind'Amour, becoming the fastest head coach to 300 wins in NHL history, doing it in a mind-blowing 488 games. And we always like to throw around the question. I know we did it recently with Bedard and Celebrini. Like, if you were starting a franchise, who would you pick? If you were starting a franchise, is he the head coach you'd pick? Buy or sell on that?
I mean, it'd be hard to come up with a better one. I think you'd have to consider John Cooper. I think you'd have to consider, I mean, there's a lot of really good coaches. I think Carolina just does it differently, though, because go back and I it's one of the best episodes I've ever done in any podcast. I had Hurricanes owner Tom Dundon, and he said, we plan on having Rod Brind'Amour as head coach of this team forever, for as long as he wants to do it. And so every single aspect of how they build their team is how will this player fit under what Rod Brind'Amour wants to do. And so it's a totally this is why I hesitate to compare it to anything else, because basically what you're saying is if you're going to have Rod Brind'Amour as head coach, you've got 10 years and you can't make a coaching change because you've built your entire team around him. So are you willing to accept those parameters? Because under those exact circumstances, I think he would be my guy. But if at some point you're going to say, I want to make a coaching change and I'm going to bring in someone totally different, I would say you could probably not do better, but you could probably get someone else, or should get someone else.
I love that you plugged that Tom Dundon interview. Every sports fan, hockey fans, you see someone, you're like, man, I'd love to have a beer with them. If you're watching this episode of the pod, go dig up that Tom Dundon, frankly speaking, and I promise you, he will skyrocket up your I want to have a beer with kind of leaderboard or power rankings. He is a wicked smart, wicked cool guy.
Wicked different. Like he's just involved in every single thing that the Carolina Hurricanes do 10 times a day. He's, talking to like everyone in that organization. He doesn't stop. And I'll give love to one more guy. If age isn't a thing and if he's really interested in doing it, I'd have to really consider Paul Maurice too. His energy and his passion. And that's a guy who's an awesome guy to get a beer with.
Yeah, that's a good pull as well. The poll results for our friends at Dominion Lending Centers. Is your mortgage up for renewal? Lock in the best rates and products with Dominion Lending Centers. Find out more at dominionlending.ca. It is that time. Frank, the YouTube. See, this is fascinating. The Twitter was pretty close to 50-50 on will Ovi break the record. 55% yes, 44% no. Our YouTube wasn't even close. 95% saying yes, Ovi will do it. I'm actually stunned seeing this Twitter that 44% of people could vote no to Ovi.
I mean, I get it. Like, he hasn't hit a wall at any point this season. What happens if he does? Yeah. You have one 8 or 10 game blip where you score twice, and that's just wasted a quarter of the games left in the season, and it's probably not happening. So I guess the point is there's not really a ton of margin for error. 25 goals in 47 games is still a lot.
Yeah, that is north of a 40 goal pace stretched out over an 82 game season. That is obviously very difficult to do. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and obviously something we are tracking here as we head into the new year. Let's get to our daily bets, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Just one play for me tonight. It's a simple money line play, although I actually don't hate the puck line either. It's the Winnipeg Jets taking on the Nashville Predators. This line being priced where it is a little bit confusing to me. The Jets, that is, have won 3 in a row. They're playing great hockey. 13-3-1 on home ice this year. You flip that over to Nashville, 3-15 straight up on the road this season. Just 4 wins in their last 10. This should be a Winnipeg Jets victory. Again, weird stuff has been happening lately, but I'm pretty confident in this Central Division matchup and taking the Winnipeg Jets at -140. But Christmas fog, Christmas brain, maybe that's a real thing, Frank. And that brings me to garbage time. As you know, Will Ferrell is a diehard LA Kings fan. And hey, Christmas is tough on everyone, Frank, including Buddy the Elf, who was at the Kings game sitting front row with, I don't know, a whiskey and, yes, I get granted, unlit cigarette in his mouth. But a lot of people, I think it's fair to feel that way after a week of Christmas festivities.
Looks like he's absolutely in one. I just love that he's willing to show up in character and sit on the glass for an NHL game. I know he's a loyal Kings fan. It just cracks me up. It's one thing to go to the game. It's another thing to go in character.
Yeah, there's something.
It's so solid.
It's good. And like the gray hair now and looking all disheveled with the dart. It's perfect.
He looks like Cousin Eddie after Christmas vacation.
He really does. That is a good one too. Okay, that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Everybody in the YouTube, it was great to see you again. It's good to have Hockey Talk back as well. Enjoy your Monday, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.